Chaitanyamayi Satyamayi Parame Satyamayi Parame Satyamayi Parame Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyotir Aravinda Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyotir Aravinda Satyam Jnanam Satyam Jnanam Jyotir Aravinda Jyotir Aravinda Jyotir Aravinda. So, a word very commonly used these days is anxiety, stress. Yeah, it's something. Vedika, come here. Come here. You'll be more comfortable. A very commonly used term today is stress, anxiety, and what we find is, except for that portion of humanity who is somewhere on the spiritual path, the rest are becoming less and less resilient to stress. The rest are turning more and more haplessly to things outside to help them out, and failing because they run from one counselor to another, one psychotherapist to another, but nothing seems to really help, because or it helps to an extent, but rarely does it help fully, because they are really barking up the wrong tree. Really, I'll start with a personal story of mine. So, when I was much younger, I wasn't into spirituality at all, only because I had no exposure to it. I grew up a typical South Bombay girl, whatever. I had no exposure to any kind of spirituality. And when I was about 22 years old, I had a very, very dear friend from school days, and she told me, let's join a yoga course. And I said yes, just to spend time with her. As you know, I teach yoga now, but those days I thought yoga was something ultimately boring and for people when they have retired and they have nothing better to do. That was my mindset, because I didn't know. So I said yes to do yoga only to spend time with her. I had no hopes of getting anything else from yoga. So we attended one yoga class and we just fooled around. We made fun. We were stupid, we were young, we made fun of everything. I came out of yoga, of that class, without any change in my opinion of yoga. 1 week after this friend who I was very, very fond of got fever. She was hospitalized, and I went to the hospital just thinking I'll keep her company. I didn't think it was anything serious. But when I went there, she didn't recognize me. By evening, she was in the ICU, and in 1 week, she was gone. And it was the first death like that, and somebody who at that time was perhaps the dearest to me, because she was my best friend since the second standard. So of course it hit me very hard, and I had no tools to deal with in those days. So obviously I was unhappy all the time. That's also a kind of stress, no? Being unhappy all the time is stressful. So I went back to the second, I had already enrolled for the course, so I went back for the second yoga class. This time nobody to fool around with, so I paid complete attention. I followed all the instructions. I came out of that yoga class for the first time in days feeling clearer, I would say a little happier, a little different. And those days I wasn't actively into spirituality, but I was into science, and the scientist in me got very curious that what had yoga done, because till then I always thought if circumstances outside were bad, there was no way I could be happy within, right? I always thought circumstances had to be altered if my happiness quotient had to change. But after this yoga class, the question arose that the fact that my friend was no more was there. But how come I was feeling happier despite circumstances not changing? And that of course started my whole journey into yoga. But so today's class actually is the answer I found to this question that rose in my mind decades ago, that if circumstances don't change, what can make us happy despite difficult circumstances, right? And the answer is in the title of this talk, Anxiety, the way out is the way in. Because I realize now that in a way that I didn't recognize, the whole yoga class had quietened my mind and given me inroads to a world inside me, right? And whenever you're stressed, you're living in your outer thoughts. You're living on your surface mind. Anxiety can only exist in your surface outer mind, right? So that is one world. It's the world made up of your narratives, your thoughts, your likes, dislikes, your judgments. But there is another world inside us, let me say another intelligence. In Vedanta, this is called, oh, I'm just talking about Vedanta and you all have come. If you need a backrest, you can come here. You all are okay? So Vedanta talks about two aspects, the Sukshma Buddhi. What is that? What is Sukshma Buddhi? Huh? Sukshma Buddhi is the subtle mind and Sthul Buddhi is the tangible mind. So the tangible mind or the Sthul Buddhi is your surface mind, and that by its nature is going to think up thoughts of stress more often because of a habit. Very often some of us are in the habit of being stressful because we are so much in the mode of stress that our sympathetic nervous system is always working, and in our nervous system there is, what you don't use you lose. So because we don't use our parasympathetic or the nervous system that kickstarts to relax, it becomes dysfunctional. So our default state becomes a state of stress for many of us. And that's when we are living constantly in our surface mind, right? But as I shared with you the story of how I came to yoga after that second yoga class without my friend, obviously the outer mind stops thinking so much. So you go to the inner intelligence, the Sukshma Buddhi, which sees the world very differently from the way the outer mind looks at the world. The outer mind is creating a world of narratives, stories, enemies, whatever. But if you go inside you, all of us have another intelligence which knows the truth of things, which just knows that at every moment the control of my life is in the hands of an intelligence which is all capable, all loving, all knowing. And then you just chill because you leave it to that intelligence and you're not stressed. But so long as you're not in touch with that intelligence that knows, anyone outside telling you this, it's just words. It can make you feel good for a bit, but not really so much ongoingly, right? So we all have just come from Pondi, and they belong to a group I just took to Pondi. So the very first evening when we were in Pondi and we were doing the orientation, many of them, we hadn't even really started our camp, but just being in Pondi, the atmosphere was such that it takes them inside. It takes them from the outer mind to the world inside, and they just start, many of them said, we are just feeling quieter, there are less thoughts, we are just feeling de-stressed after a long time. Why? Because the whole atmosphere worked to take them from their surface mind to the deeper intelligence. So that's what the way out of anxiety is. The deeper you go into yourself, you will find that that's the space where anxiety dissolves. So now, Sri Aurobindo's words from Savitri: a touch can alter the fixed front of fate. So the fixed front of fate is things that happen to you, okay? Now, what is this touch that can alter the fixed front of fate? Whose touch? There are no wrong answers here, so please answer. What touch can alter the fixed front of fate?
Consciousness.
Grace, consciousness. The touch of grace can alter the fixed front of fate. And what invites that touch? When you touch the grace inside you, you are grace. Each one of you is grace. Each one of you is magic and miracle. And when you connect with that magic and miracle inside you, you invite grace, which can then change anything, the most difficult circumstances. Sri Aurobindo writes, right? Wherever there is the God touch, nothing is impossible. All can be done if the God touch is there, right? A touch can alter the fixed front of fate. A sudden turn can come, a road appear. So when you are feeling stuck, anxiety is you're feeling stuck, right? You don't know how things will change, you don't know where to go. But that's when, if you're open to grace, a touch can alter the fixed front of fate. A sudden turn can come, a road appear. A greater mind may see a greater truth. So the surface mind sees all dark and dismal, but if you go within, a greater mind will see a greater truth. And what is that greater truth? That, as Sri Aurobindo says, in God's providence, there is nothing that's bad. Every seeming bad is good in the making. So this is a knowing in our deepest. Our surface mind keeps feeling this is good, this is bad. But the deeper mind within us has that shraddha, that faith, that at every moment life is unfolding perfectly as it should be. So, a greater mind can see a greater truth, or we may find, when all the rest has failed, hid in ourselves the key of perfect change. So beautiful, na? Or we may find, when all the rest has failed, we've run to 100 counselors, 100 therapists, I've tried this, I've tried that. Or we may find, when all the rest has failed, hid in ourselves the key to perfect change. So beautiful. So it reminds me of one more story of a boy I once taught in school. So he used to come to my yoga class dribbling a ball, and he wouldn't stop. If I'd tell him also, I had to take him to the principal finally. And he would not do any asanas, but Shavasana he was most active. He loved rolling all over the others who were in Shavasana. So he made it impossible for me to teach at one point. And then I took them to Pandi, because I take every year. And I was actually thinking, what will this boy do at the Samadhi when you're not around to roll around and move around? So the first night we went there, he sat, and I had taught them the Ujjayi breath, and I had taught them little bit to go in the heart, but I thought he hadn't even registered it the way he was. But I saw him sitting at the Samadhi with his hand on his heart, and I could hear him breathing. He was breathing louder than he should have, but he was anyway breathing. And 15 minutes passed. I couldn't meditate because I kept thinking he shouldn't walk around and disturb people. So I kept looking at him. 15 minutes passed, he's sitting like this. Half an hour passed. Everyone else was ready to get up and go. He's still sitting. 40 minutes passed, and I had to wake him up and tell him, now we need to go. So every night this would repeat. Then when we came back to Bombay, he was completely changed. He was the calmest of everyone. He was the deepest. And then I made them write reflections. And he wrote that I was actually a very happy child till the second standard. Then I was diagnosed with dyslexia, and my grades started falling. And I constantly lived with the fear of failure. And I forgot what happiness was, because I always felt others were better, I was no good, I would fail, etc. And then when I came to Pandi, I discovered the happiness I'd felt as a child, and now my only fear is I shouldn't lose this happiness. So again, the way out of anxiety is the way in. Because his parents had taken him to umpteen counselors, umpteen specialists, umpteen all that. It only helps to a point. But when he found the magic inside him, that justifies these lines, right? Or we may find, when all the rest has failed, hid in ourselves the key of perfect change. So now this is a little story by Pamela Bloom. It's a true story. She's written it as herself. So Pamela Bloom says, recently I was scheduled to have a medical test known as a colonoscopy. It is an extremely invasive procedure into the most intimate parts of one's body, and therefore frightening for most people. For that reason, patients are usually asked to bring someone with them so that they can be accompanied home. Unfortunately, due to the timing of my procedure, I didn't have anybody to come with me. So I was already feeling quite vulnerable from the start. On top of that, my veins are quite small, and my doctor had a terrible time inserting the IV for the anesthesia. For some reason, my memory of the day is still fresh, as if it is happening now. Strapped to the gurney and dressed only in a patient's gown, I do everything not to squirm, but he misses. He misses getting my vein. First time, second, third. The needle is huge and the pain is excruciating. As he taps up and down my arm looking for a vein, I can feel his nervousness through his fingers. So she's feeling she's not even in safe hands, right? If you feel the doctor's incapable, it's even more scary. Seeing me break out in a sweat, he asks if I've brought somebody with me, which is a silly question because he can see she's not. Tears well up in my eyes. That's okay, he says, unconvincingly, you'll be fine. Finally, on the fifth try, the needle connects with a vein. I'm about to exhale in relief when I hear him yell to his attendant, okay, hit the music. At this point, the loudest, most raucous, most offensive rock music blasts through the room. I am stunned. I can't believe I have to ask him to turn it off. I can't, he says, strapping on his mask. This is the way I work. So that's the most hellish place to be in, right? I'm just outraged. Strapped down like a prisoner, I feel the heavy metal beat rattle my bones. And I feel like I've entered hell. Sweat pours down my face and I begin to shake uncontrollably. Never before have I felt so trapped in a nightmare. And worse, there is absolutely no escape. In less than a minute, I will probably be unconscious. I actually feel like I'm about to be executed, poison draining into my system through the IV, because you feel everything is against you, right? I'm completely on the edge of the panic, and the only thing I have on my side is my own mind. Then, squeezed by this physical, mental, and emotional claustrophobia, something shifts. And maybe because I'm in such an intense state of suffering, I suddenly open to an awareness where I feel not just my suffering, but also the suffering of umpteen billion beings in the world who have gone through this same kind of experience. I think of my friend Sylvan, who endured thousands of IVs during the long years of his diabetes. My father and mother, my brother before surgeries. Millions I have never met who face trauma, fear, helplessness every day. The room feels full of spirits. Then somewhere in me, almost as if I have been rumbling in the dark for aeons looking for it, a prayer arises in my mind, one taught to me so long ago by my masters. May all those who have the same kind of suffering never have to experience it again. May this suffering I'm enduring release them from their agony. And then I'm out cold because anesthesia kicks in. My next memory is the nurse telling me it's over, the procedure has gone fine, and after the IV episode, there is almost no pain. I get up, dress, and take the subway home by myself. The whole episode is almost like a dream, but the experience taught me something I will never ever forget. How easily distress can arrive, how helpless sentient are beings who can sense things, how helpless sentient beings are, and how entrenched prayer must be in our mind stream so we can use it when we need it. So again, this story is living up to the title, Anxiety, the way out is the way in. Now Pamela Bloom's a practicing Buddhist, so for her, metta came. This was what she did, was metta. That was her way of going in. Each of us will have our own way of going in. For most of us here, it's going in and feeling a connection with Mother. It's whatever, connecting with our breath. But always know that when you're under stress, instead of looking outside, sit with yourself and look within, because the greatest healing can only come from inside you. Everything else will at the most solace you. It's like a first aid. But if you really want a cure, the cure can only come from inside you. So there's this beautiful song by Josh Coprin, when I am down and oh my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. So he's telling God, when I am down and oh my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burdened be, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. Sometimes when we achieve things or we are praised, the very real part of us say, hey, but I'm a very ordinary human being. How did I achieve this? The truth is, what these lines are saying, I am strong when I am on your shoulders, the shoulders of our own light inside us. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. So that's what these words are. Okay, now this is a beautiful piece on obstacles, because obstacles are what cause us stress, right? Obstacles at work, obstacles in health, obstacles in relationships. Whenever there are, you can lean back against that. Whenever there are obstacles in our path, that's when we feel stressed, because we feel overwhelmed that how will it go, what will happen, if things go wrong, how will I cope with it? That is the source of our anxiety, right? But it's always beautiful to remember that life never gives us one drop more of pain than what's good for our growth. If there is truly a meaning in every curve and line, then there has to be a purpose in the obstacle, and that's what this piece talks about. One night recently, my daughter was showing me an aquarium full of tadpoles. She had purchased a whole bag full of them for her children to watch them grow from tadpoles into frogs. It was fun watching all those little wriggly creatures swimming around in the aquarium. It brought back many fond memories of my own childhood, playing with critters down in my grandparents' house. I noticed that there was a big rock in the aquarium. When I asked her why she put a rock right in the middle of the tadpole's environment, she told me an interesting story. Any guesses? Why has she put a rock in the middle of the, yeah? Come.
Basically, tadpoles just move around.
Huh.
Just to put an obstacle in things so that they are able to swerve around.
Very good, to create an obstacle. Now remember, this was a person who loved her aquarium. She wanted the best for her tadpoles. She didn't want to hurt the tadpoles. But she has put an obstacle in the tadpoles. Okay, this she for us is the one who makes the aquarium of our life, right? The higher intelligence, the mother. And the mother also maybe puts obstacles in our path with the same intention for our good. She said that she was instructed by the pet store salesman to be sure to put a big rock right in the middle of the aquarium. He explained that the tadpoles must have this obstacle to give them the incentive to climb up, and thus split their wriggly tails so that their legs can begin to develop. If they have no rock or obstacle to climb up on, they will never turn into frogs. They cannot learn how to hop by just swimming around in water. They must have something causing resistance to give them incentive to leap forward. The man went on to tell her that last year a school teacher came back to the store and complained because none of her tadpoles ever turned into frogs. She had put all of them in an aquarium and let them swim around, but never become frogs. He asked her if she had put a big obstacle like a rock in the middle of the aquarium. She said she had not. She did not know that a tadpole would remain a tadpole unless it faced some obstacle or barrier that forced it to grow. Neither did I, but it makes perfect sense. So my daughter was excited to show me all the tadpoles swimming around the rock. in time, they will begin to try to climb up on it, and eventually they will make the transformation into a more fully mature creature. Well, I was amazed and delighted to hear that story. It helped me better to see once again why life presents obstacles and barriers in front of us. The barriers are not there to hinder us, but they are there to cause us to grow. It is not so much that the object is in front of each of us that matters, as much as it is our attitudes towards it. If we realize that the obstacle we are facing is really a gift that has come our way to help us grow and mature, we will be much more likely to face it in a positive manner. Since I watched these tadpoles the other night, I saw the big rock in their aquarium. I have begun to see the obstacles I face in a different way. Instead of being rocks in my path, those obstacles have become stepping stones to help me leap forward in whatever situation I find myself. I know that those little tadpoles have no idea what is going on. They just are not that smart. So when we are not so conscious in terms of consciousness, we are little tadpoles. We resent obstacles in our path. We feel that if we were just left to swim around in the aquarium, it would be so much better. But if we did that, we would never grow. We would never grow in faith. We would never grow in compassion. We would never grow in coping skills. So just the way the designer of the aquarium knows exactly how much obstacles to put, the designer of the aquarium of our life knows exactly how much troubles to give us just for our growth. It's never to push us under. But you know why obstacles are so important? Because to survive, we have to push our limits. We have to push our limits of faith. We have to push our limits of resilience, tolerance, which left to ourselves, we would never push. Like the tadpole has to exert that little extra strength to jump compared to swim, and every time it pushes itself that little harder, it develops the muscle to do so. Since I watched those tadpoles, one sec, the truth of the matter is neither are we. Most of us have no idea what all is going on in our lives either. We don't know that the barriers and obstacles, challenges, difficulties and hard times that come our way each day are actually there for a purpose. This is the most difficult pill to swallow when we are really going through a tough time, to accept that this difficulty is there in my life for a purpose. My reason for the difficulty is that horrible person who's creating trouble for me, or I'm a horrible person, I'm just not capable enough, I'm not doing enough, whatever. Either way, it's they are bad or I'm bad, and that's the reason for my difficulty. But that's not so. That's not the reason for my difficulty. The reason for the difficulty is that I'm so loved, that I'm given exactly the right amount of obstacle to jump over to build my strength. So each of us gets a cross to bear proportionate to the strength of our shoulders, right? If our shoulders are stronger and I need to strengthen them more, if I can easily hold a 2 kilo weight on my shoulders, why will God put only 2 kilos on my shoulders? My shoulders won't strengthen. If my shoulders are stronger, He'll put more load, just because in this birth I've come with a consciousness equipped to shoulder the load and grow from it. So There is no way we will have the incentive to grow or become better or to strive harder if everything in life is just a simple situation. I know the harder I work at anything, the more profitable it is for me, not only financially but personally in my own heart and character as well. The next time you see a frog hopping around, smile at him and thank him for the lesson, remembering the struggle he has gone through to get where he is. Perhaps out in the wild somewhere, he faced a difficult rock or a barrier in his life, but rather than swimming away from it, he just crawled up on it and began to develop his personal strength until he eventually matured to become the frog that you see hopping around. I have a whole new appreciation for tadpoles and frogs, don't you? So, obstacles are there to help. Now, let's just pause here and talk about this a little. How many of us can actually think of an obstacle in our life right now and actually believe that it's there to help me? You can? Yeah, you can. You can. For most of us, we are so overwhelmed with the difficulty that the obstacle puts in our way that we can't believe that it can be for our good, right? Why can't we believe that it can be for our good? Any answers?
It's not comfortable. The problem is that the moment you're saying an obstacle, when it's presented to us, it's somewhat bitter to taste. Like when you're experiencing it,
Louder.
It's very bitter. It's a very bitter experience. So it's something that makes you feel very uncomfortable. Usually an obstacle will not be something that makes you feel comfortable and happy. It makes you face yourself in a way wherein you're not comfortable with what you see. It's like a mirror to your defects.
Very good. The obstacle is a mirror to your defects because they say that when you squeeze an orange juice comes out, when you squeeze a mango juice comes out, when I squeeze Nash juice will come out, when I squeeze Pratna juice will come out. Nash juice may be anger, Pratna juice may be fear, somebody else's juice may be grief. So whenever obstacles come our way, it's like life is squeezing us and what's inside us comes out. So Nash said a very wonderful thing. Obstacles are a mirror. They show to us what our defects are. Somebody has beautifully said, if you want to see how conscious a person is, see how the person reacts in difficult moments. Because that difficult moment squeezes the person, and depending on his level of consciousness, the reaction or the response will come out, right? So obstacles are there as a mirror to show you what's inside you. And it's okay to see that there's not so good stuff inside me, but it's beautiful to know that I can change it. I can change anything I want in me. That's the power I have as a birthright by virtue of being a human being. I can shift anything in me if I turn to the grace which I am. Grace is not only outside, but each one of us is grace, but we don't know it and we don't recognize it. Yeah?
Also, if you say an obstacle is always opposite to our comfort zone.
An obstacle pushes you out of your comfort zone and you don't like it. So they say that pain can either make you bitter or better, right? So eventually it's designed to make you better, but for a while, if you react to it unconsciously, you will become bitter and bitter and bitter till you reach a point where you can't live with it. Then you look for another way out. But instead of going through that whole cycle, why not change it the moment it comes? So how do we deal with it? We've all dealt with times when we are down, when we are anxious. So if we have to formulate step by step, what would we do? Suppose something you get a news which really startles you, threatens your safety, makes you feel uncomfortable. What do you do? What's your first reaction? Yeah?
Suspended judgment. I like this term I read somewhere. The moment something happens, the first thing we do is a rapid judgment.
Very good.
So suspend all judgments at that moment.
Very
Do
good.
not start judging the situation.
Very good. In fact, beautiful that you said that. These are mother's words. They come later. Sri Aurobindo's words. Okay? On suspended judgment. You have to develop the power and the habit of taking refuge in the protection of the mother and myself. It is for this reason that the habit of criticizing and judging by the outer mind or cherishing its preconceived ideas and formations must disappear. This is what he's saying, that suspended judgment, well, it's difficult to suspend judgment in a limbo unless you're a spiritual giant. But if you suspend judgment into the faith that whether it seem good or evil to men's eyes, only for good the secret will can work. That I'll never be given more pain than what's good for my growth. So if something goes wrong in your life, instead of trying to fix the outside, first let me fix my reaction inside. That's the first step. Instead of turning violently on the outside, picking up phone, bad mouthing, trying to make the person see you're wrong, let me first see, when I've been squeezed, what has come out of me. What is my unique juice that has come out of me when I've been squeezed? And then that juice will create a whole narrative in my head. But that narrative will seldom be true. Look back and see. When you've got bad news about something and you've built a whole story, how often has that story been true? How often? Has it been true often? No, right? Very often you think, my God, what a trip I was going on. It wasn't at all like that in the person's mind, or it wasn't so much like that in the person's mind, right? So, firstly, don't believe the story your mind makes up about it, because it's not real. It's your imagination, it's your past conditioning. So, that is what it means to suspend judgment. And instead turn to faith. That if I've been taken to it, I'll be taken through it. That there is a purpose to everything. That if this obstacle has been put in my path, I'm like that tadpole. I'm meant to leap. Only then I'll become a frog. I'll never grow spiritually if I don't stretch myself.
No, I always find that more than the storyline, it's the emotional thought process that kicks in. You're very emotionally driven. More than the situation, we are more concerned about what we are feeling about it.
But you feel like that about it because there's a judgment and a story, right?
Exactly. So, and that as you said, that archive in my mind is of anger. So, if it's anger, for whatever reason, for me, if it's anger, then I don't need a reason. It's already there as a trigger. I've already, that story or situation is not very important, it's a habit. At that point, it's become such a habit for me to get angry. At the story, I'm looking for an opportunity to get angry.
And the smallest trigger will bring it out. So, one is suspend your judgment. However true your story feels, don't buy into that story. Don't buy into the predictions of doom for the future. Arey, this has happened, now this will happen, now I'll go for a toss. Don't buy into that whole fabrication about future anxiety. So, Sri Aurobindo says, so you should repeat to yourself when this story or anxiety arises, Sri Aurobindo and the mother know better than myself. God, life intelligence knows better than myself. They have the experience and knowledge which I have not. So if I was a tadpole and I was resenting the obstacle in the aquarium, if I was a white tadpole, I'd trust my owner. I'd say the owner knows better than me what's good for me. If she's put this obstacle in my aquarium, it must be for my good. Sri Aurobindo and the mother know better than myself. They have the experience and knowledge which I have not. They must surely be acting for the best and in a greater light than of ordinary human knowledge. So the first thing is to not believe the mind. That's the biggest thing, because we've become so addicted to believing our mind, right? And so convinced that what it's telling us is the truth. So try not to believe the mind. My mind is convinced it's like that, but it may not be so.
Surrender to the grace.
Surrender to the grace. Then Sri Aurobindo says, faith, says Sri Aurobindo, is an intuition. An intuition not only waiting for experience to justify it, but leading towards the experience. So it's it's brilliant. I've never come across such a definition of faith by any other author. He says faith is an intuition. What is an intuition? A knowing of the truth that comes from beyond the mind, right? So I said that we live in two worlds. One is the world of our thoughts, which is constantly judging and creating narratives. The other is the world of our heart, where there's a knowing. It's not a belief, it's a knowing that everything that happens is being controlled by an intelligence that is all loving. The Ved scriptures say that not even a leaf from the tree falls to the earth without that will sanctioning it. So if this difficulty has come in my life, it has to have come by sanction of that will. And if it is so, that will knows better than me. I'll go through a grind, maybe I'll feel uncomfortable, maybe, but let me be excited for the challenge. That let me see what growth I can make from it. Instead of resisting it, instead of wishing it away. It's beautifully said, no, what you resist persists. What you embrace flows with grace. Beautiful, no? If you keep resisting the obstacle, it will persist. But if you embrace it with faith and surrender, you'll flow through it with grace. What you resist persists. What you embrace flows with grace. So faith, Sri Aurobindo says, is an intuition. If you quieten your mind and you go within, you will intuit that everything is well and everything is exactly as it needs to be. So it's an intuition, not only waiting for experience to justify it, but leading towards the experience. So beautifully said, faith is believing in what you don't yet see, and the reward for faith is seeing it. Your experience will justify that faith. Now?
Yeah, I was just thinking, even if you want to surrender something, the whole thing is that at that moment, the practice of, let's say, peace or equanimity, that actually helps you into going through, because every time you think of surrendering also, there has to be some sort of an equanimity and peace within you.
But what if I don't have access to that peace and equanimity? Many times when you're stressed, you're stressed because you don't have access to that equanimity and peace.
That's what I was saying, that when you're surrendering, the state of mind may not be peaceful.
Yeah. It's work in progress towards eventual peace. You may not have the...
Lead to that.
It can lead to that.
So what helps me is practicing acceptance at that moment.
Yeah.
Because while I know faith is there, but because we don't see it, like you said, once we fall into the flow, then we see it later.
Yes.
But in that brief moment in the interim, acceptance is what I've consciously started to practice, which is what helps me in the moment.
Yeah. That just saying yes to whatever life brings. If it's come, it must be good. Like the tadpole faces that obstacle, suppose it just said yes and did its best to jump over it instead of resisting it. So, now words of Satprem from Adventure of Consciousness. We speak of error because we do not yet see the good it is preparing, or of which it is a rough hewn half. We feel things are wrong because we don't see the good that the wrong is preparing for. We speak of falsehood because we have not had enough time to see the lotus blossom out of the mud. The lotus is a very interesting flower. Sri Aurobindo's symbol is also the lotus, na? So is mother's. So lotus in Sanskrit is called pankaj. Pank is kichad, in Sanskrit, and ja is born out of. So the beauty that is born out of dirt. So if you just see the dirt and there's no lotus inside, you'll write off the dirt. But if you wait, you'll see the beauty of the lotus blossoming out of it. It's like that. Everything ugly in our life is the kichad which is nurturing the lotus eventually. So, because we don't see the lotus, we call the mud ugly.
It's the same like she has Vandana Gupta, Dr. Vandana Gupta, she has a pond over there.
Yes.
That pond is full of mud, muck.
Yes.
The lotus which blooms over there
Is so beautiful. We speak of black, but our daylight is black to one who sees the light. Our error was the necessary companion of good. So we should actually bless all our mistakes also, because in Savitri there's a beautiful line, our errors are His steps upon the way. Okay, our errors are also God's steps upon the way. Our error was the necessary companion of good. The no, the inseparable other half of the yes. White and black and all the colors of the rainbow were the varied forms of a single light which gradually uncovers itself. There are no opposites, only complementaries. The whole story of the ascent of consciousness is that of an unsealing of vision, the passage from a linear and contradictory consciousness to a global consciousness. The whole story of ascent, rising of consciousness, is an unsealing of vision. Right now our vision is veiled by our thoughts. As we grow in consciousness, the veils get thinner and thinner, and the lotus which is in the mud becomes more and more visible to us. And then we actually bless the mud. The Buddhists say no mud, no lotus. To find the lotus, the mud has to be there. Okay, so now let's summarize. If we are in a dark hole, what do? First, we become aware of our reaction, of the stories in our head. And we try to suspend our judgment. We try to accept that whatever we are thinking about the situation may not be necessarily true. But actually, we become unconscious. We need constant reminders. At that moment, nothing in you will remind you not to take your story very seriously. So I'm just suggesting somewhere in your house or whatever, put up a placard, suspend judgment or whatever, because this is something you'll keep forgetting when you become unconscious. So don't believe your mind, believe your heart, the intuition of faith that is telling you that if you've been taken to it, you'll be taken through it. That's the first starting point. But if you actually want to get out of that anxiety, you have to go within, because anxiety, the way out is the way within. So let's practice a little bit of how to go within as Mother and Sri Aurobindo have given us, and we'll work with that. So sit tall. Relax your shoulders, relax your jaws. And to start with, take deep breaths. And touch the palm to the center of your chest. Right palm first, left palm over it. Let this touch feel as if the palms are a metaphor for ringing bells at a temple, not an external temple. A secret temple inside you, a secret Matri Mandir, Mother's temple inside you. So let the touch of the hands on the heart feel like ringing the bells or walking up those steps into Matri Mandir, or entering the gate of the Samadhi and entering that space inside. Because the Samadhi, the Matri Mandir, all of them are not geographical. They are spaces in consciousness, and they really exist within us as well. So just touching your hand there with the aspiration that I'm coming in, help me to come in. And then gather all the scattered threads of your awareness and plunge them into the center of your chest. If an image helps, bring an image in your heart of your highest reverence, or as if you're making a video call with that place. Whatever helps you to connect with the energies of that place. Or just saying Om Shri Aurobindo Ma in the heart. Whatever helps you to enter the Matri Mandir inside you. For those of you who haven't been to Pandi, you can visualize your highest reverence in the heart or just the image of the sun. And then relax your hands when you feel a connect. Keep your hands there till the temple door as if opens, till you're allowed into that temple inside. Till then, with aspiration, keep your hands there. Once you've entered inside and you feel a pleasantness inside, you can relax your hands. And just breathe, going deeper and deeper into the heart space. Now become aware of the top of your head. This is another gateway to the temple inside you, to the magic inside you. Turn the top of your head to the space overhead like a flower turning to the sun. And the mother says, quieten your thoughts as much as you can and focus in the overhead space till you feel drops of light as if falling on top of your head. And mother says that those drops of light will become thoughts of light, and you know that they haven't come from your thinking mind because you've made your mind as quiet as possible to receive those drops of light. Now enter the heart as if you're entering a lift. Climb to the overhead space. Exhale as if your out breath is the vehicle that brings the light down your entire body as you breathe out. Inhale, enter the heart and climb up. Exhale, flow down your entire body. And then visualize Mother sitting in front of you, and whatever you're anxious about, see if that anxiety is located in some part of your body. Typically it will be. So if you think of that anxiety, see which part of your body feels tight or uncomfortable. You know the anxiety is lodged in that part. If you can sense that part, good. You may feel a tightness in your chest or belly or head when you think of that thing that makes you anxious. If you can't figure out that part, just focus on your head space inside your skull. Now as you inhale, as if your inhalation is hands going into that part, plucking out the anxiety, and as you exhale, drop that anxiety at Mother's feet or on her lap. Inhalation, go into that part of the body or your head space, as if your inhalation has hands to pluck out that anxiety. Exhale, drop that person you're anxious about or that feeling of anxiety on Mother's lap or at her feet. Do it with intention for a few breaths. Then fold your hands together in a namaste and see if you've done it with faith and intention, how light you'll feel after doing it. And just know the moment you feel light inside you, the outside will start easing. The Mother has beautifully said that the moment you get a positive faith about something, it means on a higher plane that positive outcome has been sanctioned. So take a long, slow inhalation, breathe out with Om.